It's not by the power of Grayskull. It's by the power of 3 non-blondes. Were they not? Were they blonde? I don't think there was any blondes. I know there was a
No,
ginger
they're not
after there was problems with the cast, wasn't there?
Yeah,
Is that right?
But she wasn't ginger for long.
She wasn't ginger for long. Did she do a spell to get rid of it?
Well, she started out. No, did she start out as a brunette and then she went ginger? I think.
No, she was a natural ginger.
Yeah, but when she first came onto the series, she was brunette for the first season.
I don't know. Either way, it's the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast, episode 75. And we're talking about 90s pop culture iconic TV series about witchcraft and stuff, Charmed. Because if you're a witch that was around or grew up in the 90s or found your path in the 90s, you were all thinking that was good witchcraft. I know that because all of the old witches always moan about people coming to them and asking questions based on Charmed. Much like nowadays we got questions about Harry Potter. Back in the 90s, it was mainly about Charmed or maybe Buffy the Vampire Slayer, wasn't it?
I do love Buffy.
Do you love the Charmed series? Because it ran for a long time. Do you like it?
I did. I loved it. I've even got, I think, somewhere, VHS tapes where I taped episodes. Somewhere.
Right. What other things did you tape from back then? Because I want to see it and draw a comparison between, obviously, this, if it's so important to you that you taped it, what other TV series and stuff did you tape?
Well, my 3 favourite episodes from Buffy, when Willow goes crazy, those are my faves.
Right. Okay.
And then, I don't know. Movies mostly. Movies that I liked.
Right.
That were on television a lot. But no other series, I don't think.
Right. So this is how good this series is, that Chris actually taped some episodes of it. And we all know Chris is a super witch. So there must be surely some genuine super occult knowledge hidden within Charmed. Now, is it that you've just learned all of your craft from that TV series Charmed? Or is it just that the White Lighters really did it for you?
Do you know, I didn't really like the White Lighters at all.
You don't like the ones modern times, though, do you?
No, the Dark Lighters were sexy. I liked some of them. Some of them were good.
Okay.
But no, I felt they were too softies. They were just too soft.
Oh, they are, yeah.
And far too easy to kill, in my opinion. No, before we go any further about it, I will add a little caveat of they were actually self-proclaimed Wiccans in the show.
They were. Yes, they were.
They are the only Wiccans I've ever enjoyed.
But they weren't actual Wiccans. Neither the cast nor the actual people were, because it was basically just Christian, wasn't it? And then it started off with Christian-y kind of ish. You know, they replaced angels with white lighters and then eventually started moving into the kind of, oh, well, maybe God exists, maybe it doesn't, but it's one of those things that the closest you get is the angel of destiny type thing, which is a grade above what was the God type thing at the beginning of the series, which was the elders, which were like higher level. What would we call elders? Would that be like advanced witches or something like that?
Ascended masters, like Jesus, I guess.
Yes, ascended masters, essentially. It was that kind of idea, wasn't it? Although it was very interesting that when the ascended masters, where they got better, and then you had the Titans come back and they kicked their ass and started killing them all, didn't they? All the Titans, they just cleaned up the joint. So very interesting. Reminds me a lot of real life.
My favourite ones were when the avatars came in, who exist outside of time. Is that us?
Yeah. Do you know what? Some would argue that. Yes. But anyway, some people don't like it when we talk about pop culture, but we're gonna talk about pop culture. We're gonna talk about this because it was a very I think, instrumental in a lot of people going to the magical path, and a lot of people going to the witchcraft path, and a lot of people going to the Wiccan path, right?
Yeah.
And thinking about the whole, I don't know how many seasons it was, but it was quite a few. The whole thing, is there anything that springs to mind as being kind of equal to real life? Is there anything that you could say, oh, if you want to know about that, just watch this episode? Or is it all absolute trash, but fun trash to watch?
It was fun trash to watch. Anything that really comes to mind? Well, I like the intriguing part of the trio part. This kind of coven that didn't need to be 13 or something like that, I quite enjoyed. And I like the caveats about ancestral magic, that kind of inherited power
That gets stronger with every generation was the basis there.
That kind of,
which is how it should be, really.
invested power in blood. I think that was an interesting one. You know, and this idea that each generation shares power, I think that doesn't get covered anywhere else. So, like, it wasn't like there was just one powerful witch in that generation. Depending on how many of them there were, would depend on how the power was split. Obviously, they were a relatively small family. Like, it didn't come into, like, it was direct matrilineal. Like, these are the women in this family kind of thing.
And it caused a scandal eventually when that didn't happen anymore.
Well,
but it was a prophecy, wasn't it? It was a prophecy. It was all about, the charmed ones. When our magic, after growing it for so long, because you saw this in that Dante's Code thing, they did a little bit about that, but they did it more about sacrifice, whereas this is more about teaching the next generation, and it just kind of grows in the blood, and they make a big thing about blood in Charmed. And then it culminates at a point in the future, where the charmed ones, 3 witches, will be born that will be at the ultimate power level, you know, for that family. And then obviously that is essentially what the TV series is about. They'll reorganize the entire world and underworld and whatever the fuck other worlds, all magic in general. And then basically the series was them going about fulfilling the prophecy to do that.
Yeah. And then obviously the series was too popular and they wouldn't cancel it. So they then got to a point where they had to change the storyline altogether for the last 2 seasons. But like, you know, where they had to then have this ultimate power, which clearly is better than the chosen ones. So so ultimate.
Well, that's the fakers, isn't it? That's the fakers battling the real deal.
Yeah.
So I find the whole thing, if you don't learn anything else from it, which you fucking won't. But the one thing that I think is really quite interesting is the whole coven dynamic there. Because it's not just, because I mean, with any series that runs for a long time, obviously the characters develop. So you see them develop over literally years and grow up. But also the fact that they have to do little feuds and spats and things like that are in there that last. And the interesting dynamic between the 3 main characters, which was the 3 sisters, and then other members of the family, and all that kind of thing, and how they have a kind of 2 careers. They have their mundane life and they have the magical life. But it's not like you see in a lot of this kind of teenage drama stuff, where it's all kind of, I don't know, super secret-y kind of, we're part of a club type thing. It's more of a case of, well, we're doing this. We know we have to keep it secret, but it kind of encroaches on our everyday life. And I think for a lot of people that would have been watching that would be, I think, what a lot of people would be able to, I don't know, like to see. They can draw comparisons with that in their own life, because it is very much I'm struggling with this. I have to keep this literally boxed up. I can't let anyone in. And most of the time, whenever there's a fucking massive problem, it's because they've let someone into the fold. And there's only like one or two, maybe three, that really coped with it. And everything else, it always ends up badly, which normally is the relationship side of things, which is another fascinating comparison between Charmed and these would-be nice witches, that they always have really fucked up love lives, often. Whereas all the bad ones seem to have brilliant love lives.
Yeah, it's kind of it's that focus on the secret, isn't it? Kind of the broom closet conundrum of when is it comfortable to tell mundanes about it, and that kind of dynamic of knowing when to and if to reveal your secret, I guess. But then I suppose at that point when it was out, that was what was kind of going on, wasn't it? It was this kind of another new revival, probably the biggest one since the New Age, of this kind of interest in magic, and this kind of revival of kind of Wicca, like it's, you know, second wave, shall we say, of Wicca that kind of starts about the 90s. And there is that kind of, oh, well, is it safe to talk about it? And obviously they had like one of my favorite sidelines in the series was the cleaners. One, because they were just so funny, like that kind of deadpan humor. They were almost British. Like there was that kind of feel about them, you know, stern, not liking dirt, very camp. Like it was, they were my my favorite kind of twosome. I don't know why they always appeared as a two, but they just seemed appropriate. I don't know. It was, I don't know, a nod to Laurel and Hardy or something. I don't know.
It was double act, didn't it?
It was a double act.
Some say we're a double act. You know that, don't you?
No. But it reminds me of, again, another show the Americans will not know, but that one with Aggie and Kim.
Oh, yeah, Kim and Aggie, the cleaning people.
The cleaning people. Like, you know, you kind of got that imagination of someone wearing white gloves that kind of just runs their fingers through the dust, then goes, oh, this place is disgusting. Like, and then gets a big yellow glove out and kind of spanks it, you know? Like, there is that kind of aspect of when they arrive, it's like, you've made an awful mess and now I must clean it. All because somebody found out or photographed proof of magic. It kind of fed into that kind of conspiracy theorist kind of personality that I guess you get in paranormal investigators and all that kind of stuff.
Because the thing is, magic isn't accepted by the everyday, although it used to be. So then when they make series like this, whether it's Harry Potter films or books or anything supernaturally, they try to put something in there that explains the fact that why don't all the mundanes realize that magic is a real thing? Obviously, it's not understood that it's a real thing because it's difficult because it's easy.
Yeah.
And then when you manage to master it, it suddenly becomes very difficult because it's difficult, because you're really pushing yourself. But it's no different than many other things that a lot of people believe to be impossible. That has nothing to do with magic. It's one thing that I would ask, actually, your opinion on. So the legacy of the Charmed TV series, everyone always shits on it. And as a fan of it, someone that takes VHS tapes of it, clearly you are a fan. How would you think that it gave more good than bad? Because remember that it very much pushed so much of the shit that's still around today. The ideas of not doing magic in any form with personal gain or a comeback times 3 type thing, or this idea of active powers, whereas each witch has got like a very specialist type thing. You know, where nowadays we've got the, well, I'm a green witch, well, I'm an astral witch, well, I'm a fucking candle witch or some shite like that. Or a lot of this stuff in the 90s, the really bad times where you had all the books coming out, And a lot of the books, the Wiccan books like that, were saying, "Oh, it's not like Charmed. It's not like Charmed." But then they go and talk a load of shit that's exactly the same, much like the paranormal investigators these days say, "Well, it's not like Paranormal Investigation on TV. It's not like Most Haunted." But then they go and do the exact same fucking thing, you know. So, in terms of its legacy, do you think it did more harm than good looking back?
I think it did more good.
Justify that fucking answer, Chris. Justify that answer.
Because I don't feel that you can blame the series for the sorts of things that you could associate with it that you just did. So, like, you know, because in no way, shape, or form did it categorize witches in these other than kind of good, bad, which obviously the New Age season, the New Age was already doing. What was nice about Charmed was they were kicking ass. So it was kind of like, these are good witches, but all they do is actually bad spells all the time. They weren't airy fairy. So, like, you know, it wasn't them kind of casting love spells and shit like that. Like, every time any of that happened, it went horribly wrong. Like, because it broke a sense of moral code that it went to. Because actually, I don't think they really stuck to this kind of very Wiccan idea of personal gain. What I think they tried to focus on was actually, is this necessary and how would that magic play out? Because actually, if you're realistic about some of the things that happened, you know, love spells turned into obsession, those sorts of kind of like, they did point out some pretty basic things that we still have to constantly point out to people that start this journey and kind of go, well, actually, you're asking for someone to obsess about you. That is a love spell. Like those kind of, you know, and then like split personalities caused by, I'm thinking of other kind of love spells, to be fair, when she conjures herself a man, and then
Make
kind
me a
of
man,
he splits into a Gemini situation where there's a perfect version with her and an evil version trying to, you know, take over the world. But both versions are specifically trying to please her, but they both please her from opposite directions, which still hits the obsession. I think one of my favorite episodes, which really probably sells my point, is the love spell one with the Tatiana book.
Right, yeah.
Where they they turn them into animals or something, I think happens in that one. But the bit about it was this idea that she sat there, re-changed the spell to say why it didn't work in order to make the spell work. And obviously, you know, the bit that always irritates me is the rhyming couplets. But obviously in that moment, she changed the journey in the wording that when she reworded it. And I think that kind of hits the kind of three sides of the triangle kind of stuff that we always talk about. It just hits it in a very floozy way. I'm not saying that it actually teaches occult knowledge, but what I'm saying is there's a touch of it which kind of starts off this craze of different TV shows that actually have done their research. You know, kind of like with the Harry Potter series, the amount of research that J.K. Rowling must have had to do to get these little, you know, I think they call them Easter eggs, don't they?
Yeah.
Of little nuggets of information, like the Nicholas Flamel stuff. Unless you've actually read about alchemy, you will have never heard of Nicholas Flamel. But there are lots of people like that she's kind of, you know, woven into the story, because she had a keen interest in alchemy. And let's face it, she's turned paper into gold. So I don't think anyone can argue that she.
Well, she has an interest in alchemy in general in her private life, doesn't she, J.K. Rowling? But I mean, we could do a podcast on that at some point. I was gonna say, what about the ideas nowadays? Because there's two things that I'd be interested in touching on actually. Because they did a remake of
which
Charmed,
I still
which I've
haven't
not
watched,
and I heard it's a load of shit. But there's this idea of feminism being pushed in Charmed. But then there's also the idea now that a lot of flack is being put on the type of feminism in Charmed and even the idea behind it, the whole concept of that. So that's one thing. And the other thing is cultural misappropriation, because nowadays all of these feminism, cultural misappropriation, racism, all of that is massive buzzwords. So if we can put some of these buzzwords in before the Patreon cut off, even if we don't discuss them, YouTube or Buzzsprout or iTunes is bound to put us in some sort of algorithm. I don't know if that's good or bad yet. I've not done the research, but I know we'll be listed in something. And it's relevant because you've got little leprechauns. If they do an episode on leprechauns, it's the most fucking stereotypical leprechaun with a pot of gold type thing. And it's all very kind of, I wouldn't say Disney. It's very stage show. It's very musical stage show / pantomime. I think pantomime is
very
probably
panto.
It is very
very
camp panto. The way they tackle pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And
even down to the vampires, their version of vampires, in that very kind of bad CGI turns into a bat kind of situation. It is very pantomime.
So cultural misappropriation in the fact that they are making cultures and stories super pantomime. And it's funny and kind of camp. Is that a bad thing when they're doing it to everyone? Or is it a bad thing in general? What do you feel as someone that lives in this century and then looking back at this, which was last century, and understanding the politics of everything nowadays? Because you're essentially a child of the 90s, aren't you? So you grow up with this sort of television. Whereas you think people from the 70s and the 80s and that grow up with a very specific type of television as well, and how that flavors your understanding of that now.
I'm probably going to say something. I'm going to be judged no matter what I say, but I'm of that feeling of equal opportunity. As long as everyone is being mocked, and the people being mocked are included in the story, I think that's always the tricky part. Is the person, you can't have it as a white thing that we talk about over here, if that makes sense. I'm using white because that's the best version of describing my face. That Western, you can't look at it from a Western perspective and not include the others. So that's, and again, I've used the word others. There are lots of things that are wrong with that statement, but it's hard to say these things.
I'm tripping you up purposely because you're ill before the end of the episode. Because controversy equals clicks, you see, Chris.
But it is one of those. It's one of those things where some will argue that you can't caricature anything unless you are part of the group in which is being caricatured.
Oh no, you're not even allowed to do that now.
So it's tricky. I feel that actually there is something to be learnt from the caricature. Lots of people would disagree, including, some of our favourite witches, no doubt, over in Witchcraft Live and the Patreon will disagree with me on that. But there's a reason that things are caricatured. And the reason those things are caricatured because they must have some kind of vein of truth in them for people to actually be able to make that connection. So you can talk about slurs and the kind of brutal way of actually, well, no, these are just started in a type of hate, and therefore, I'm sorry, but a leprechaun is a leprechaun. Like, at the end of the day, they come all in all shapes and sizes, but the ones that you recognize are the ones like on the Charm show, little Irish sounding, ginger, wear a lot of green. Like, those things have become, because they've become visual, because what we learn as human beings is archetype. So to remove an archetype means that you will all of a sudden lose 90% of your audience because they don't understand what is going on. And when you have something that is a fantasy series like this, that's talking about esoteric magics, there are certain stereotypes that are always going to be there. And the reason they're there is because it allows the audience to understand what they're talking about. So, you'll have the busty maiden, and you'll have the charming, handsome, save person that comes in and saves hero. That's the word I was looking for. There will be this kind of evil person that has to have some kind of, ugliness about them or deformity. There is going to be something that is wrong with them. And whether or not that is going to be, just being ugly, or if there's going to actually be a brokenness to them. So some kind of evil has happened to them that has made them evil. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, all those things will always exist because that's what storytelling is. And what people often struggle with is separating politics from storytelling. And with the Charm series, I wouldn't have it any other way, because even by reproducing it in the most politically correct way of delivering it has actually meant there's only been one series of it. So that either says all the people watching it are complete racists, homophobes, and bigots, or that says it delivered something that isn't delivered in the politically correct version. And what that is, I don't know because I haven't watched it. But there were lots of people that were turned off purely by the cast that was chosen. And that's a racist thing.
No, I understand that a lot of the people that jumped on the bandwagon of saying it's a racist thing and that, from my understanding, are a lot younger. And that when they were going to do the new version of Charmed, they did polls and they put a lot of information and asked the original fans what they wanted. And all of the fans pretty much overwhelmingly said, we want it to carry on from where it left off. So they want to see all of the kids that were coming along growing up. They wanted to see all of that. They just wanted it to be same universe, same characters, but 10 years later. And what they decided to do was completely abandon all of it and do a remake with the same storyline, just a little different. And the thing is, when you're watching, it's very different to taking a book and turning it into a film, right?
Yeah.
What is different is when you take something that's already visual, like when they remake another Spider-Man and it's the same fucking story. And eventually you're like, well, I grew up watching this Spider-Man, or I found this Spider-Man really good. And then all the other ones that come after is kind of like, this is kind of fucking boring, It's the same story. We know what's going to happen. They've just seemed like they're just getting more basic, the characters.
Yeah.
And with this, it was very much that kind of idea. I think I watched one episode and that was the impression I got. But it's not a priority for me to watch, to be honest with you. But there we go. I think that's it for this episode of the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast. If you want to hear the extended episode, get on the fucking Thoth Witchcraft Patreon. I mean, what are you not doing on there? Seriously, there's so much secret occult knowledge on the Thoth Witchcraft Patreon that you're not allowed to know unless you pay us £3 or $4 or however much it is. I don't bloody know. But get on there. The link is in the description, people.